We're now recording and everyone from the lobby is in the meeting.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to this public meeting of the Northern Beaches Local Planning Panel on the 4th of October 2023. My name is Peter Biscoe and I'm the chair of the panel. With me today on the panel are two experts, Jason Pereira and Oliver Klein, and a community representative, Peter Cotton. The panel acknowledges the traditional custodians of the lands on which we gather and pays respects to their elders past and present. There has been a disclosure, a signed disclosure of interest forms by all members of the panel, and no members of the panel have declared a conflict of interest. The minutes of the meeting of the panel held on the 25th of September 2023, I note, were adopted by the chair and have been posted on council's websites. There are 4 agenda items for the public meeting today. There are also 5 agenda items for the non-public meeting, and I'll refer to them all in a minute. For the public, as regards to non-public meeting items, by a statutory direction by the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces, the panel is only required to hold a public meeting where the development application has attracted 10 or more unique submissions by way of objection, and these applications for the non-public meeting do not satisfy that criterion. So our procedure will be, first of all, to deal with the public meeting items. Then we will retire into closed session to consider our decision in relation to those items, and also at that time deal with the non-public meeting items. Usually the panel is able to reach a decision, a reasoned decision, on the same day, and the results of that are posted in the form of minutes on the council website, usually within a day thereafter. The 4 public meeting items today are as follows. Item 4.1 on the agenda, PEX 2023/0002, is a planning proposal at the Warringah Recreation Centre. Item 4.2, DA 2022/0837, concerning 155 Pacific Parade DY, is for demolition works and construction of a residential flat building. Item 4.3 is REV 2023/0019, relating to 8 Baroona Road, Church Point, and that is a review of a determination by this panel of application DA 2022/1650 for alterations and additions to a dwelling house, including a swimming pool. And the final public meeting item is a development application 2023/0830 relating to 38 McCars Creek Road, Church Point, for the use of a cabana and boat shed. For completeness, I'll mention the non-public meeting items, which we will be dealing with after the public meeting is closed. There are 5 of them. 5.1 is DA 2022/0646, relating to 122 Queenscliff Road, Queenscliff, for demolition works and construction of a residential flat building. Item 5.2, DA 2023/0335, 161 Riverview Road, Avalon Beach, for construction of a boat shed and deck, timber jetty, skid ramp and pontoon. Item 5.3, DA 2023/0090, relating to 883 Barrenjoey Road, Palm Beach, for demolition works and construction of a dwelling house, pool and boat shed. Item 5.4, DA 2023/0888, relating to 25/37-38 East Esplanade, Manly, for alterations and additions to a residential apartment. And finally, item 5.5, DA 2023/0926, concerning 68 The Corso, Manly, for alterations and additions to a commercial premises and uses of food and drink premises and associated signage. There are a number of registered speakers The public meeting, for the public meeting, that gives the speakers an opportunity to address the panel orally. It's not an opportunity to make any further written submissions. The panel has been briefed with all the written submissions, so it's unnecessary for the registered speakers to address them in that degree of detail. Speakers normally have 3 minutes in which to speak, which may be extended upon application to the chair. A bell or buzzer will sound at the end of your 3 minutes. And speakers are requested to use respectful language. So without more ado, I will now turn to the first item on the public meeting agenda. That's item 4.1, PX 2023/0002, a planning proposal at the Warringah Recreation Centre. There are no objectors registered to speak. For the applicant, there are 2 registered speakers, Gina Hay, Principal Planner at Northern Beaches Council, Community, Commercial and Tourist Assets, and Campbell Pfeiffer, Executive Manager, Property, Northern Beaches Council. Ms Hay or Mr Pfeiffer, would you like to address the panel?
Sorry, I'll commence. I actually wasn't going to speak any further to our submission. I just wanted to thank the planning staff for their time and the recommendation, and say that as council, as the applicant, we support the recommendation.
Ms Hay, is there anything you'd like to say?
Good afternoon. No, there isn't. I'm simply here to answer any planning questions from the applicant's side that may arise in the course of your discussions and deliberations.
Thank you. Does the panel have any questions, either of Mr Pfeiffer or Ms Hay?
I've got one, Mr Chair. Just want to make sure from the applicant's point of view, Jason Perica, so I know that clubs does trigger seniors housing in an RE2 zone. This is RE1, but I'm just, from your point of view, is there any other unintended or incidental implications of allowing clubs on this land that you may be aware of that hasn't been identified?
Through the chair, I might answer that one. No, there's a very clear intent around the use of this land. There's a DA that is currently underway by the golf club, which is for a golf club building.
Yeah, aware of the background. I'm just wondering if the solution to it might have other implications other than allowing that DA.
Not that we expect, and not that we can foresee.
Okay, thanks.
Is the panel, are there any other questions from the panel?
No, no.
Yes, well, thank you. Thank you, Mr Pfeiffer and Ms Hay. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, item 4.2, DA 2022/0837 relating to 155 Pacific Parade DY for demolition works and construction of a residential building. There are no objectors who are registered to speak, and there is one speaker registered for the applicant, Mr Greg Boston of Boston Blythe Fleming. Mr Boston, would you like to address the panel?
Yes, thank you, Mr Chair. Look, I'm simply here to answer any questions that might arise from the panel's deliberations. We can also confirm that we raise no objections to the conditions as drafted, and to that extent, just ask that the panel endorse the recommendation before them.
Could I ask you, sorry, does the panel have any questions? No. Mr Boston, could I just ask you to clarify the parking situation, please? This may arise out of the assessment report, but how many car parking spaces are there provided?
My understanding is the DCP requires 25 spaces and there's 26 spaces provided.
Right. The reason I ask is that when I go to the assessment report, and I don't know whether you have the same pagination as mine, but from page 147 of the agenda papers towards the top of the page, it refers to 23 car parking spaces as being the proposed development.
Yeah, look, there's some additional commentary on the top of page 184, and there's been a number of iterations, as you're aware, in relation to the basement configuration, just to deal with this overland flow issue. But certainly, as the application sits, there are 26 spaces proposed.
Okay. And of those, the actual dispersal is there's some for visitors, is that right? And some for disabled people.
Yes, that's correct. I'll just need to open up the plan to confirm that split. I just don't have that basement floor plan open. I'll just get that up.
Well, I noticed at one stage, and I think it might have been 163, it was proposed there were 3 disabled parking and 3 visitors. I just wondered whether that was still the case.
Sure.
That's at page 164 of the papers. Well, there's a bit of confusion. It says at page 163 there are 22 spaces, including 3 disabled and 3 visitors, but you've clarified that there's 25.
Yeah, I'm just there's a number of different referral comments relating to different iterations, but I can I'll just confirm that for you. Okay. Yes, the basement floor plan nominates 3 disabled car parking spaces. And there are 3 visitor spaces.
Okay.
Also nominated at the upper level.
Okay. So that leaves 19 spaces for 16 2- and 3-bedroom apartments.
That's correct. The of those 3 disabled spaces, those 3 are for residential apartments as well. So out of the so there's 23 car parking spaces available for the residential component.
22, I think you mean, don't you? 25 minus 3.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. Does the panel have any other questions?
I just got one question. Sorry, Peter Cotton, the community representative. Just could you confirm that the stormwater line running to the south along the south boundary is in an easement, existing easement?
Currently, there are no easements over the property at all. So, and the overland flow path was something that was sort of picked up later in the assessment of the application, so that there are currently no easements.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Boston. That seems to conclude that item. So we'll move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is item 4.3 at 281 of the papers. That's a review of a refusal by this panel of a development application for 8 Baroona Road, Church Point. That application, DA 2022/1650, was for alterations and additions to a dwelling house, including a swimming pool. There are 2 registered speakers. There is an objector, Dennis Smith, a director of Thomas E. Planning, speaking on behalf of the owners of 10 Baroona Road, and for the applicant, Jitka Jankovic, a designer for the application. Mr. Smith, would you like to address the panel?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel members. Firstly, I represent the owners of number 10 Baroona Road, who share a common boundary with the subject site. I have also been involved in preparing an original letter of objection to the DA that was refused by the same panel. We have reviewed the amended application and the plans that were submitted with it, together with the view analysis, solo access agreement, and the notice of determination by Council on the 5th of April. It is our opinion that the amended plans that are the subject of the review are cosmetic only. All they basically do is move a number of factors around in respect of the roof, and most certainly fail to adequately deal with the grounds of refusal, and in particular the grounds of objection that had been outlined previously to Council, and again will be as part of the submission that we make, both this submission and the one we submitted in writing. Firstly, in respect of the documentation, there are a number of significant issues whereby there is inconsistency and non-compliance with the objectives of the C4 environmental living zone. That is the character of this area. It is considered that the application most certainly does not meet the desired future character of the locality. There is a mixture of residential housing in this precinct. However, you do not have the same scale and density of development that you would see as a result of the amended proposal. The amended proposal is also considered to be an overdevelopment of the site, and that is a direct result of also whereby our client, being number 10 Baroona, their view is adversely impacted upon. That is not something that is in question. The development will result in an unreasonable sharing of views, and in particular, the views that they share currently on Scotland Island and the interface between water and sand. The bulk and scale of the development is also inconsistent with the character when viewed from a public place, and the development could take the view of a 6-story residential apartment building. The development is not consistent, or is it considered to be in the interest of the public, in that the resultant development would have unreasonable impacts on the adjoining development and the immediate locality. Overall, the revised plan proposal continues to exhibit non-compliance with the front building setback, the landscape controls under Pipwater DCP 21, in conjunction with adverse impacts of both solar and view on the neighbouring properties, being in particular number 10, our client's property, which are reflected by way of an overdevelopment of this site. The revised plans also continue to present unacceptable amenity impacts to number 10 by way of view sharing impacts to Scotland Island, and also, as I previously pointed out, the interface between water and sand. Most certainly, this development, being the subject of the review, in our opinion, represents a development which is more harsh from an environmental perspective upon our neighbours' amenity, and in particular, view sharing and solar access. We strongly endorse the recommendations that have been made by the staff. That is that this application, the subject of the review, should be refused, as it has not adequately addressed the matters of the grounds of refusal as per the decision that was made in April of this year. Happy to answer any questions, but we just wish to emphasise that this precinct is a low-density residential precinct, and the scale, height and massing of this development is not considered to be in character with the area and the prevailing built form that exists in the immediate locality and under the zoning, which is a particular zoning to try and control the density of development and the scale of development. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions relating to our client's property, because it is probably the most adversely impacted upon as a result of the subject proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Does the panel have any questions?
No.
No.
Thank you. Then we'll
Thank
move
you,
on.
panel members.
We'll move on to the next registered speaker, who, as I previously indicated, is Jitka Jankovic, the designer for the application. Ms. Jankovic, would you like to address the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and the panel. I just want to say that we have made a few amendments to the original DA application, which we have actually reduced the height and scale of the building by reducing the toppermost addition, which you probably can see here. I don't know if you can see. Now, in this particular plan, it shows the adjoining neighbour, which is this one here. In scale, it's very, very in scale, they're very similar. Now, in terms of the controls, we have complied with the landscaping, even though they have mentioned that we have not. We have come up with a 61% control that it meets the compliance of the landscaping. I'm not quite sure where they got the incorrect dimensions from that. It was mentioned that they've taken the areas from the landscape architect. Now, when I'm not quite sure how they managed to scale that, it is an incorrect scale, but our controls are compliant. In regards to solar access...
I'm sorry to interrupt you in mid.
Yes, that's okay.
I didn't quite follow you. You're referring to somewhere in the report about landscaping that you say?
Yes, it was actually. Now, I don't have it in front of me, but in one of the items it mentioned that the planner has actually taken the areas from the landscape architect that we also submitted the landscape concept drawings. Now, he doesn't show any forms of percentages or areas. This is where we came in and we have shown exactly the controls that is required, and we meet those controls above the 60%. So to us, it complies with the scale in regards to the landscaping. Now I'm going to go down to solar access. We've also provided a number of shadow diagrams which can be viewed on page 9 of the DA submission, which is this one here. It indicates that number 10 will only lose 1.5 hours on their terrace area. It will not be affected at all in regards to this proposed addition. The scale of our proposal in comparison number 10 is far less. As I mentioned, the scale of next door exceeds way beyond what ours is. So the view, there's no, with solar access, it's fine. It complies with the minimum 3 hours. Again, we go back to the view sharing. Ultimately, they've got 180-degree views. They will be slightly affected at this point here, and also only portion of it will be affected from the terrace areas. Again, it was mentioned. We've actually hatched, I don't know if you can see it, we've actually hatched, this is from their terrace, what will be affected. They will still see quite substantial areas of water. Ultimately, yes, understand about Scotland Island. This one's got a lot of trees, so it's not going to be affected. This one here, you will still see the connection between land and water. This one here as well will This one from the terrace area, again, will have numerous views. It will lose some of the Scotland Island views, but it's looking directly over my client's property as well. So majority, when you're sitting out on the terrace, you'd be looking out straight. The other factor was when viewed from a public place. I took this area. This is taken from the road, and it's looking from the quays where the cafes and all that are. I've highlighted up here. This is the proposed addition. As you can see, it is not going to affect, the proposed addition will not affect views from any water views. You can see all the other houses, and the next door number 10 is far bulky and excessive when viewed from any waterways. So this proposed addition, because the addition is actually, it follows the topography. I'll just show that if I can hold it up, if you can see it. That's taken from Pittwater Road. I couldn't go out on the, I couldn't hire a boat, but it would be very similar looking from the water of what you're going to see, because it steps up along the topography of the land. It is not an overdeveloped project. It consists, okay, 6 bedrooms, which is very minor to what nowadays. If we chose to put the building on top, number 10 will lose a lot more views than what we have done. We have tried to achieve to follow the established topography of the land, and also to reduce any impact upon any trees or landscaping as well. Front building setback, there was a proposal back in 2013. We had an approval which was approved by council back in 2013, a garage with a studio above it. It was forward of the building line. This was approved. That was the floor plan. That's the front elevation. What we have come up with now is a bit more sympathetic to the streetscape. We have put a pool, but that is behind the building line. All I can say is that it meets all the compliance as per, we have covered everything. Apart from the view sharing, which always is a very major issue, it is not as great as what has been stipulated. All I can say is that they're going to have greater views. I'm not quite sure where their living areas are located. Majority, it was taken, there's a terrace, I think it was up here somewhere. They're going to get views over top of our building. Again, this one here, that's the scale of the proposed, and the number 10 Baruna, and the views that they're still going to be receiving. Apart from, this is the front one, you've probably seen all this. We've tried to put as much landscaping to the front to soften it so that the streetscape is a bit more sympathetic with the outside surrounding. But again, all I can say is that it complies with solar access. They will not lose anything, any forms of solar, only 1.5 hours. When viewed from a public place, it's not a great deal of bulk and scale, excuse me, that will be seen. There are other properties in the vicinity that are larger in scale and are going to be viewed from a public place greatly. In terms of landscaping, it also complies with the 60%. So it's not an overdeveloped site. It complies with the landscaping, and it also follows the topography of the land. We haven't actually removed any major trees, and being within it's nestled within the existing landscape environment as well. So that's pretty much what all I've got to say.
Thank you very much, Ms. Beck. Does the panel have any questions?
No.
No.
No, thank you. Well, that concludes our speakers for item 4.3 on the agenda, 8 Baroona Road, Church Point. We'll move on now to the next item on the agenda, item 4.4, concerning 38 McCars Creek Road, Church Point, the use of the cabana and boat shed. We have no objectors who are registered to speak. For the applicant, we have two speakers registered. They are Vaughan Milligan of Vaughan Milligan Development Consulting Proprietary Limited, speaking on behalf of the applicant, and Nicholas Hall, the owner. Mr. Milligan or Mr. Hall, do you wish to address the panel?
Mr. Chair, I think Mr. Hall has a submission he'd like to put to the panel first up, and then I've got a couple of comments after that. So with your permission, I'll hand over to Mr. Hall in the first instance.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall, just for your information, we have read your submission that came in yesterday or the day before. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, panel. First of all, I'd just like to start off with an apology, actually, that we're actually here today, that we've gone around it this way with this issue. We took the decision at the time because we believed this was cosmetic work in keeping with other structures in the area, and we did this in consultation with our neighbours. In retrospect, we should have carried this out differently, so I just want to put that apology first. As for what I would just like to say is I really want to just give you a little bit of background on why we're here or what's actually happened here. We first purchased 38 McCars Creek Road off of the actual owners of 40 McCars Creek Road, so Ruth and Brian Bridgewood. We purchased that property off of them in April 2021. Now, as you can see from the aerial photo, or hopefully you've seen the aerial photo that's in the submission I put in the other day, or the additional information the other day, you can see it's a very unusual shaped block. The block itself is a dogleg shape, meaning that some of our garden and recreational areas are actually in front of a portion of their house. Now, that's actually their laundry that we're actually in front of. Now, Ruth and Brian, they undertook extensive renovations about 4 years ago, so just a little bit before we purchased the property, and they took the decision to build right up against the boundaries. So again, if you look at that aerial photo, you can see where they put their house right up on the boundaries there. Okay, so when we purchased the property, we moved in, we consulted with Brian, the owner, on how are we going to privatise the properties, because having them build right up on top, no problem, but they are up on top. What do we do about this? Brian's word to us at the time, which we repeated several times, in a nice way, by the way, were, I do not want to see you, I don't want to hear you, I don't want to see your kids swimming in the pool. So we came up with a design which was a roof structure over the recreational area and over some of the existing boat shed, which that roof structure that we designed was there to really privatise the properties. So the design itself includes acoustic treatment in the ceiling to stop audio from going up to their house. It also includes audio treatment in the blades that privatise the properties. So the blades are on the side, but what they're also intended to do is to carry the acoustics out and away from Ruth and Brian's property. Again, we did this in consultation, extensive consultation, and to ensure that Brian and so on were happy. Now, on 7th of December 2021, Ruth decided she didn't like it because primarily it affected her views. I'm just going to read an excerpt from her email to us dated the 23rd of the 12th, 2021, where Ruth says, I apologise for our change of heart, but both Brian and I have been torn between trying to be good, amenable and cooperative neighbours and putting up with a structure that would clearly take away much of our view, look awful, especially from my bedroom and balcony, but also from our kitchen and lounge, and reduce the value of our property. Of course, I acknowledge that Brian's badly chosen words that you can do as you wish. and that he often does not go to council for his own projects was not helpful. If you like, I can at any time provide full email if we think is necessary.
I'm sorry, that's me, my mistake.
Sorry.
Excuse me a second.
Oh, so the main problem seems to be, do I wait, panel?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the main problem from the neighbours themselves, Ruth and Brian, is one of views and one of privacy. So I just want to deal first of all with privacy. The shaded structure that we've put up is absolutely necessary in order to privatise the properties. That they've built right up against our recreational areas, right up against our gardens. So the only way of privatising is for us to either do that, or sorry, there's not one way, there's two ways. We either do something like that, or we're not there at all. Obviously, the second is not an option. Regarding the views, again, the submission that I put in, I think hopefully you can see those photos were taken from their balcony with their permission, by the way. So we took those photos from their balcony, and as you can see, the only views that are being affected are of our pool area and of our garden area. There would be one room that would be affected directly looking out, and that's their laundry, which would be affected in exactly the same way by us erecting a fence. So regarding privacy, so that their main concerns being privacy and views, I really don't think they're applicable at all. Okay, I'd just like to now move on and pass comment on the boat shed itself, because they've also they've lashed out and complained about the boat shed, the interior changes that we've made.
Now, Mr. Hall, I haven't heard our bell go to indicate the end of 3 minutes, but I'm sure we're well beyond it. Would you like a little?
I'm nearly there. I've got two more paragraphs to go. If that's cool. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to comment now on the objections to the internal changes. Now, that boat shed, that's been there for around 50 years. We have not changed the outside structure at all. So in the letter from council, there's talk about this not aligning with the use of a boat shed. So I'm hoping, again, from the submission, you can see from the photos that we've put there, it absolutely aligns with the boat shed. So we use that boat shed to store life jackets, paddles, inflatable toys, and my son and I, we use that boat shed. We've got 2 outboard engines. We service them, and we use that boat shed to service them. We've even got an engine stand bolted on the wall in there where we service those engines. So look at the photos, please. The shed absolutely aligns with the definition and use of a boat shed in that area. Yeah, that's all I've got. So happy to field any questions, and thanking you for. Oh, sorry. Actually, no. Yeah, one last thing I would say, because there's talk about the sewer there has put in a toilet and a sink in there. I have to say there was already sewer and waste in the boat shed when we took that property on. The one change that we certainly did was the sewer and waste were going straight out into pit water. Of course, we changed that straight away as well. Yeah, happy to field any questions, and thank you for allowing me to address.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Does the panel have any questions?
No.
Mr. Hall, at the beginning of your submission, you said that in retrospect you would have gone about this differently. What did you mean by that?
I would have gone to Vaughan first of all and asked advice, or a town planner, and asked advice on how we proceed and what's the right way and what permissions do we need. So it's certainly not fun being here at this point and being in dispute.
Thank you. Well then, Mr. Milligan, would you like to address the panel?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and panel members. My clients have provided some fairly detailed submissions, so I don't propose to go over those. I think you'll have the late submission to the panel. There's also a late submission we provided to the application to Council's officer, which includes photos of nearby boat sheds, which are very similar in their use, and also examples of 2-storey boat sheds, which are matters in the report before you of concern to council staff. So I'd probably confine my comments to some of the fundamental concerns raised in the assessment report. Most significantly is whether the changes to the boat shed and the use of the roof are structures which is contemplated within council controls, and most particularly clause 7.8, which is the extent of development envisaged by the LEP in the foreshore area. In your deliberations, we'd ask you to consider clause 7.8.2 and in particular B. That lists the range of structures which the LEP feels are appropriate uses, structures within the foreshore area. We believe that we fall within an outdoor recreation facility. That's there is a definition of what that encompasses within the LEP. And if we examine that in detail, we're comfortable that this is a recreation facility for my clients. There are a couple of facilities which are specifically excluded, recreation area, which is for a public use, an entertainment facility, which is, again, more commercial, larger scale, theatres, concert halls, clubs, and major recreation facilities, which are stadiums and large community facilities. This provision refers to residential property. It doesn't exclude residential property, and it just refers to a building or a place that is predominantly used for outdoor recreation. And that's what the use of the boat shed roof is for my clients. They have a swimming pool, which is below the mean high water mark. They've got a deck area associated with their boat shed, and as Mr. Hall had pointed out, there are photographs of the boat shed is still accessible for the range of marine equipment he has. We haven't restricted access and to get from the waterfront into the boat shed. And so the concerns in relation to the Commander, we think are covered by clause 7.82. We think we successfully should be considered as a recreational facility. And for that reason, we didn't provide a clause 4.6 submission because we believe we're a permitted use and something that is contemplated within the controls. So that's our submission in relation to the permissibility of what we're proposing. We are there is no further construction work beyond a minor reduction in the roof overhang of the roof at the waterfront boundary. It currently overhangs partially. It covers the extent of the boat shed, but part of that roof is below the mean high water mark. So we are bringing that back, cutting that back by about 700 or 800 millimetres, so it stands wholly above the mean high water mark and within our private property. And then I think my comments otherwise pick up on what Mr. Hall referred to. The officer's report has considered the submissions from the neighbours, and I think, and I agree correctly, concluded that the view impacts associated with the structure are not significant. The primary concerns from the officer are visual and acoustic privacy. And as Mr. Hall has pointed out, he has already installed, to date, he hasn't carried out any further work since this was raised by council's compliance staff. But prior to that, he had installed acoustic treatment to the roof, to the roof lining, the underside of the roof. The intention is, the plans note further privacy screening. That is intended to be as acoustic screening. And if the panel were minded to support our proposal, we'd be happy and expecting conditions asking for further acoustic treatment. So in response to the officer's concerns, we believe we can address those. We believe we are permissible, and and the panel may not have had the opportunity to have an extended view of the waterfront in the immediate locality, but you will find on file, Mr. Hall has prepared a very comprehensive list of photos in either direction, but in the near vicinity of his site. And boat sheds and rooftop uses such as his own are common and really do form a feature of the waterfront locality in the immediate vicinity of our site. We'd ask the panel's support of our proposal. We'd ask you not to support the recommendation for refusal. We believe we can and have successfully addressed the controls, and we would be happy to look at further measures if the panel thought those relevant for addressing further visual and acoustic privacy concerns. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions, as well as Mr. and Mrs. Hall who are here, if the panel have any queries.
Thank you, Mr. Milligan. Does the panel have any questions?
No.
Yes, I have one, Mr. Chair. And look, I think it's probably best directed to Mr. Milligan, and don't take these questions the wrong way. I'm just asking for your help in my understanding of the arguments being put forward.
Sure.
So in terms of to me, it centres in terms of permissibility around the characterisation of the use, and I think there's two separate issues there: the use of the boat shed and the use of the roof of the boat shed.
Mhm.
So I guess, and there's two different conclusions being reached between your client and the council staff about the boat shed itself. Have you've seen it? You've been in there?
I have, yeah, have been in
And
there.
I guess, and my reading summary of it is that it's used for storage of an inflatable boat or vessel, and used to maintain motors on the one hand, versus the argument that there's a couch, there's a TV, the proportions and the fit out all for primarily for residential use. So how can you help me here in working out what the predominant use of that is, where it's presumably used for both?
Yeah, look, I guess it'd be difficult to characterise a predominant use, but I would say, given it's at the waterfront, it's for them as the first and foremost for the storage of the marine equipment. That's the only area where they're stored. The home has other, obviously, internal recreation areas, living areas. So I'd say this is only ancillary. So if I had to characterise it, I'd say the primary use is a boat shed, and it has those secondary uses of the toilet and the there's no cooking facility, so it's not for any separate habitation. It's beside a pool, so I don't think it's unreasonable for the owners to have a toilet in association with the pool, their deck and their jetty for their boat. So I think it's got other facilities which support the use of the boat and the marine waterfront area.
Right.
Difficult to put in. It's a predominant use, but I'd say boat shed.
So does that mean you're also raising the prospect that some of those uses might be ancillary to swimming pools, whether they're toilets or other spaces, and as swimming pools permissible, that those other ancillary uses are also made permissible by being ancillary to a swimming pool? Is that the argument you're raising?
I'd agree with that. I mean, this is a common facility in the area because of the nature of those uses at the waterfront.
Right. In terms of the roof, so just so I understand, so the recreation facility outdoor that you've quoted, and you're saying there we should use the definition within the dictionary of the LEP for that? Yep. And is there so if we didn't come to the same conclusion as you, is there a part B that is there an alternative interpretation that you'd say still makes it permissible, or are you essentially hanging your hat on the recreation facility outdoor argument?
Well, I think if it's a matter of trying to characterise the use, I mean, our application, I mean, we've got to this point without prior consent. In order to regularise the application, council would expect a planning use to be associated with that space. So I'm looking at what uses the planning controls might contemplate. And then secondary to that would be, if we're successful in gaining planning consent, then a building information certificate would cover the structural side of the building.
There's no other, like your ancillary to the pool argument that it basically you're seeing as a recreation facility. I mean, just looking at that definition, I guess the difficulty I'm having with it is when you read the whole definition, it's, and you could see how it might plain English be an outdoor recreation space if you sit there and recreate. But when you read the full definition, it does say predominantly for outdoor, whether or not operate for a purpose again, including golf course, golf driving range, mini golf centre, tennis court, paintball centre, lawn, bowling green, outdoor swimming pool, equestrian centre, skateboard ramp, go-kart track, rifle range, water ski centre, or any other building or place of a like character used for outdoor recreation. But does not include some other things. So would you say that it's relevant to consider the range of uses defined to try and understand what's intended by that definition? Because you wouldn't, I'm just not seeing, a dining room table used in conjunction with a dwelling being of the like to those sorts of uses, that's all.
Yeah, look, I agree and I understand your question, and that's normally how you would apply those. I think that contemplates a wide range of facilities, but I think, I'm stopping basically at it's suggesting recreational areas and ancillary buildings. So I'd say it's not excluded, and it's the nature of ours being a private use, which is again not excluded. It's not saying it can only be for commercial use. It is different to the other facilities in there, but it doesn't exclude it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Well, thank you very much. Mr. Hall and Mr. Milligan. That concludes
Thank you.
all public meeting items on the agenda today. As I indicated earlier, the panel will shortly retire into closed session to consider those items and also the non-public meeting items that I identified earlier. The panel will now adjourn until for approximately half an hour until 1:20 p.m.
Okay.
This public meeting is now closed.